Because I would like to get onto the subject of...
Me.
No, not you, but something that you were involved. Why don't you tell the fine folks at home what you did yesterday, and and just relate the experience.
Okay, all right. A couple weeks back, we have the web address or email address tv@atheist-community.org for any kind of feedback, whatever for the show. On Channel 11, there is a show called the Regeneration TV show. They had written to the list and said that last season or whatever, they had been a Christian apologetic show. Now they're more of just a general talk show that's open to any free exchange, open ideas, other faiths, whatever. They wanted to do a show on atheism, and so would one of us like to be on? I stuck my hand up in the air and said, yeah, sure. So on Saturday,
and props to you for doing that. You know, going into the lion's den, right? I mean,
exactly. I figured I wanted to have some fun, see how it was going to go, because I've heard a lot of times the previous Jeff D, who used to host the show, had typically said that whenever they have these debates, they usually go really badly, and I've heard this thing from lots of other people in the group that they usually don't go that well. So I had reason not to go there.
And there are reasons for that. They're specific, which we'll get into in a second.
But I figured I want to try it. It looked fun.
Yes, well.
So anyway, went on. He had said that he was going to talk about falsifiability, universal logic, and just typical atheist arguments. So on Saturday. I'm already chomping at the bit.
Go ahead.
So anyway, on Saturday, went to the show, sat in on it. I thought it went fairly well, but obviously there's some disagreement among us. Basically, I was on for about 45 minutes or so. First 15 minutes was all just actually the host of the show.
I heard they had technical glitches.
Yes.
Like they started up.
Yeah, for like the first 15 minutes, the sound was cutting in and out really badly.
Yeah.
Essentially, you couldn't really hear anything of any value at the first 15 minutes of AC equipment.
That happens around here sometimes.
But anyway, I was on for about 45 minutes. First 15 minutes was arguments presented by the host of the show, just saying, here are some of the really bad arguments that Christians usually have. Pascal's wager.
Right.
Problem of evil, that type of thing. And how these arguments just plain old don't work. So we went over those for a little bit. And then he got onto a long thing talking about faith. And what is the biblical definition of faith versus, Webster's definition of faith? And then talked a long time about logic and, what are the absolute logical laws.
Yeah.
And then kind of threw something right at the end before it was before the show was over. So,
right. Yeah.
In general, I mean, the atmosphere was very friendly. This was not an all-out, bloodbath brawl of,
Well, ostensibly, right?
So,
okay. On the surface, there was the appearance. Okay. All right. So that's your summing up. Now, for those of us,
I'll step back.
For those of us who are watching at home and throwing pillows at the television screen, here's what really went on. Okay. All right. There is a reason that quite often Christians or atheists actually are reluctant to debate Christians face to face, but not just atheists though. Their skeptics are quite often whether it's whatever you're skeptical about, right? Psychic powers, ghosts, UFOs, conspiracy theories, what have you, are generally speaking very reluctant to do these face-to-face debates with true believers, right? Because you're arguing often at cross purposes, and the languages are different, and quite often true believers will just, throw anything out there, okay, without really regard to, are their positions consistent, and what have you. They'll use. It's often an exercise in spot the fallacy. Okay. But specifically, right? Atheists debating Christians. Okay. Before you went on this, and I'll explain in a minute why I didn't go on the air, and I didn't agree to do it. Last night, before you went on, I sent an email out.
Yes.
Actually, this would have been Friday night because the show was Saturday. So
Karen?
Yeah, could we get the crew to like pipe down a bit? You guys are being way too loud.
The volume, just keep it down.
Anyway, okay. What did I sent you an email,
Yes.
more or less spelling out exactly what I thought.
What to watch for.
Yeah. What are these guys going to do? What are the most likely things that these guys are going to pull? And what was the number one thing that I warned you about? Come on, there's a quiz. The number one thing that I cautioned you that they were going to try to do.
Who's on two?
I have absolutely no
Okay.
idea. I mean, I know these things.
Shifting
I've heard
the
them,
burden
but okay.
of proof. Okay. I mean, that is the number one thing that Christians will do when they're trying to debate atheists. It's always shifting the burden of proof. And sure enough, this entire show was about that, right?
Yeah.
And so what was very clear to us watching at home, right, was when the show was starting up, and it's an hour show, right? The first half of the program, it seemed like, right up until halfway through the show, half past the hour, it was, you guys were being all matey and chummy and palsy-walsy and laughing back and forth, and, the impression was given that, oh, isn't it great, that the Christians and the atheists can sit there and be friendly and have this nice civil discussion, right? And it's all, But I don't know. Did you have? Was there in the studio like a monitor like we have, where you can see? Okay.
Yeah.
So then you must have seen on the screen, right? What they basically had was they had the image matted on the top and bottom.
Yeah.
The bottom mat was this phone number to call in, although they didn't take any live calls, oddly. And on the top, right, was this word that they'd made up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which ostensibly was they were calling the focus or the subject of that particular show. And the word they made up was something called fatheism, right? Okay, so right off the bat, this is the attempt to shift the burden of proof onto the unbeliever, right? Attempting to characterize atheism as being just another faith, right? Okay, and I'm going to repeat this in very clear, succinct terms, all right, so that hopefully all the mouth breathers in the audience can get it for once, okay? Choosing not to believe a claim when you haven't been given evidence to support the claim, when you haven't been given sufficient evidence to believe the claim, that's not an act of faith. That's common sense.
Yeah.
Someone says, I have an invisible magic dragon living in my backyard. Oh, okay, can you prove that? Well, no, I can't. Oh, well, then I guess I don't believe you.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? What's the guy going to say? Well, really? Gee, seems like it takes an awful lot of faith for you to say that I don't have an invisible magic dragon in my back. No, of course. I mean, it is self-evidently stupid. Choosing not to believe things when you don't have a reason to believe those things through sound evidence is not an act of faith. Okay? But Christians constantly want to characterize it as such because, in the reality of the situation is that the burden of proof for any claim rests upon the person claiming the thing in question, right? The existence of the thing in question. If you're a UFO believer, right? If Farmer Ned, wants you to believe that a UFO landed on his pasture last night and got all of his cows pregnant and mutilated his daughters, okay, then it is not your job to prove to Farmer Ned that a UFO didn't land on his pasture. It's his job to prove to you that it did. If he fails to prove to you that it did, and you say, Farmer Ned, I don't believe you, sir, you may be a pillar of the community and all that, but you haven't proved your claim, that's not you acting on faith.
Yeah.
Okay? It's as simple as that. But anyway, they had this thing at the very top of the screen, right? Fatheism, right? Which was this, this word they'd made up. So while the exchange is going back between you guys, back and forth, all friendly and chummy and ha 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 and all of this, right? They are throughout the entire show condescending to you. Okay, they're being patronizing by having this word above your heads.
Yeah.
Okay, fatheism. Okay, so they're like being friendly to your face, and they're insulting you pretty much throughout the entire show on screen with that little term. All right. Now, had I been in your shoes, I would have immediately leapt on that. I would have pointed to that and said, "Guys, I'm curious about this word you've made up, because it seems to me that the only thing that the term fatheism could possibly apply to would be theism, right? Because you are the guys who have this invisible magic friend, okay." And you can't prove that he exists to me. Yeah. Okay, so you guys are operating on a faith-based belief. Yeah. And so it certainly isn't my position. The atheist position is an extremely modest position. Yeah. We are simply saying, lacking sufficient evidence, we choose not to believe this claim. Yeah. So atheism is completely modest in that regard. So I would have jumped on that, and I also would have jumped on this. This is what is on their. This is what was on their website. How they were advertising it. I don't know if you read this, but this was on They're talking about January 17th, fatheism, right? There's this little term. And they says, it is said by some that Christianity is based on faith, but atheism is based on science. During this show, reading here, it says, we will discuss what the Bible means when it speaks of faith. We will look at, now listen to this, I want this to sink in here. We will look at the total bankruptcy of science. And we will also discuss the great faith of atheism. All right. Now, we've also talked about this, crap about, atheism being a faith. So we've disposed of that. But again, I want to repeat this just to let it sink in. The total bankruptcy of science. Okay. Now, I'm sorry. If your view of science is that it is totally bankrupt, you're an uneducated idiot. Pure and simple. Because what you are saying is that if you think science is totally bankrupt, you are saying that people not only are incapable of acquiring knowledge, because that's what science is. It's the acquisition of knowledge, right? But they are also incapable of applying that knowledge to their lives. That's what you're saying if you are saying science is totally bankrupt. Yeah. It is because of science that these clowns are able to go on and have a television show. Yeah. Okay? It's because of science that people can eat. All right? So agriculture is a science. If we didn't have it, we'd all still be hunter-gatherers. So if you want to say science is totally bankrupt, good for nothing, yeah, I have some problems with that, guys. Okay, so there's another one. But, all right, so anyway, what went on in the show, right, was using like this first half hour, and they started handing you stuff, like you mentioned. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, here's what we're getting. It's like, all right, here are all the Christian arguments that we think are stupid, too. Yeah. Right? Oh, Pascal's wager, ha ha ha, isn't that dumb? And, Benny Hinn, isn't he just such a fraud? Hee hee, right? And we're sitting there at Russell's house, and we're going, Ashley, they're softening you up. Okay, they're softening you up for the jab. Over here, and then they're gonna and that's kind of how it sort of panned out. Yeah. Now, I liked a lot of the things you said, right? Yeah. You made considering the situation you were in, so you got in some good points. You got in an explanation of the difference between atheism and agnosticism, and agnosticism, agnostic theism, that distinction, what have you. Although one thing that the host pulled, which you should have stopped him, was he tried to make, when you described, you didn't really talk about the difference between strong atheism and weak atheism. Yeah, but you made I kind of meant to tie that in with Gnosticism, agnosticism, atheism, but then he tried to characterize that as almost like being, like strong atheism is the old school of atheism, but new atheism is more like it's more reasonable. Yeah. And we're like, no, it's not like it's not a trend thing. It's just most atheists prefer like. Just to explain really quickly, strong atheism would be somebody asserting there is no God, there can be no gods, God does not exist, and that's the end of it. And whereas weak atheism, which really isn't weak, intellectually speaking, is more, I don't believe in any gods because I don't have any evidence, and so there's no reason to believe, and I just don't believe. Right? Yeah. Which is less, declamatory than the other, right? But I know people who hold the strong atheist position and who can argue for it. Yeah. Quite well. So, but he then began to go into, like you said, these, well, what does the Bible have to say about faith? Yeah. And this was how he started doing the shifting the burden of proof, because that's ultimately what he tried to do. But what was interesting was they did it in a different way that I haven't quite. I mean, the traditional way of Christians trying to shift the burden of proof, unsophisticated Christian apologists will just try to pull out the old canard about, well, it takes just as much faith not to believe in God as it does to believe in God, so, you guys are, no better off than we are. Well, what they tried to do on the program yesterday was bring up two things. He first talked about, like, definitions of faith, and the whole biblical thing of, like, evidence of things not seen, right? Which I would have stomped on right away. Like, he tried to say, well, he tried to say, well, now, if you go all the way back to the Greek, and so playing musical translations and everything, like find the translation that says what you want it to say, and then that's the one you agree with, right? This is typical. And what I would have done is held up a finger and said, stop. Okay, I don't care. Look, if Paul, in his epistles wants to like say that words mean things that they don't mean, okay, he doesn't have the right to do that any more than Joe Blow does, right? we know what evidence is. Evidence, by definition, is that which we can either see or feel or detect.
Yeah.
Or have,
detect in some way.
Evidence is an epistemological term,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what it's referring to. The term evidence of things not seen is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Okay? It's like saying the circle is a square. So, if Paul wants to say that squares are circles, I see no reason why I should just accept that.
Yeah.
So giving me what the biblical definition of faith is immaterial to the discussion. Okay, that's where I would have stopped him. But the worst part was when he then got on this ludicrous tangent about the laws of universal logic, right?
Yeah.
And he showed off a bit. He talked about, clearly he's read, a few books on the subject, or he may have even studied it, but, he's talking about the laws of the excluded middle and non-contradiction and what have you, to kind of show off that he knew a thing or two about it. But a point that Russell made on the radio show yesterday, because we did a little commentary about this also, was how some Christian apologists think that, logical arguments are things that they can just construct in a vacuum.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they can just, formulate these logical arguments, and will, and that you can just use those alone to kind of prove that God exists.
Yeah.
But the logical arguments themselves don't have to have any reference to just the reality in which we live, right? So pure logic, is a thing that you can use to prove that, George Washington was a water buffalo. Okay, so. So, the laws of universal logic, don't really matter. But, what he did, though, in the end was, and here's how he shifted the burden of proof to you, right? He changed the focus of the discussion to being biblical definitions of faith and why those are somehow better, because it's, but basically what Paul did was he came up with a definition of evidence under which God got to exist.
Yeah.
Okay. So he just, that's really all he did. And then, of course, the laws of universal logic, which he stated as, he made this argument from declaration, okay, that these require a universal lawgiver, which you didn't make him back up, okay. That is an assertion that he had to provide proof of. And I would have stopped him right there and said, okay, that's fine. If you want to take that as the premise of your argument, okay, that the laws of universal logic, whatever they are, require an absolute lawgiver, you now have to bear the burden of proof for that claim.
Yeah.
Okay, but he wanted to just argue that. He wanted to make that crew, guys, please. He wanted to just make that argument state that as an a priori truth, right?
Yeah.
And then just say, because you can't prove, Mr. Atheist, that the laws of universal logic can be understood without an absolute lawgiver, then I'm right and I win. And this is like in the last... So that's how he did it.
And that was the hardest part, is that was the last 15 seconds of the show.
But that's how he shifted the burden of proof, right? It's like he tried to make the central issue at hand definitions of faith, biblically speaking, and the laws of universal logic being some sort of, a priori truth for God.
Yeah.
Whereas, the real question at hand is, look, guys, does your invisible friend exist or not? What is the evidence you've got for it?
Yeah.
Okay. You remember the O.J. Simpson trial?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember Johnny Cochran? Old smooth, slick, smiling Johnny Cochran? Okay. And what happened, right? I mean, by the time the trial was over, it was no longer about, did O.J. Simpson kill these people?
Yeah.
It was about, isn't the LAPD evil?
Yeah.
Isn't the LA Police Department really evil, and we need to do something about all this corruption in the police?
Yeah.
Look, they got these racist cops, and, he shifted the jurors' attention from what the core issue really was, and he created his own core issue that he wanted them to think about so that they would join in on his, and so he got his acquittal, right?
Yeah.
What happened yesterday on that TV show was you got Johnny Cochran. Okay? That's basically it, right?
Yeah.
So, but, it's very instructive. Again, kudos to you for doing it, getting in that sort of, but, a lot of us have been talking about this whole experience amongst ourselves in the group.
Yeah.
And it's always very instructive, to know what, the arguments are that, Christians will use. And across the board, right? Most of the time, it will be some sort of exercise in shifting the burden of proof.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that what you said, and what I really appreciated about your appearance was that you did come across as the friendly, positive atheist, which I'm sure confounded a lot of stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I know that the audience for their show is probably predominantly Christian, their pals and their fellow church members, and so it's a Christian viewership. So that was good.
Yeah.
And I understand that you didn't really challenge him as much as I think you should have, right? So as not to, come across as, the rude guest.
Exactly, the mean, hard-assed atheist.
Yeah, because I think another thing I warned you about in the email was, watch for attempts to bait you into an emotional response.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think they tried to do that explicitly, but clearly you were on the lookout for it.
Yeah.
So that was a good thing. But unfortunately, what it allowed this guy to do at the end was, and this is the most amazing thing too, was he put an argument in your mouth. Okay, after spending 15 minutes brattling on about the laws of universal logic and all this, just Boolean algebra and all that crap, right? He then turned to you and said, "Now, Ashley, you've been saying that you're justifying your atheism by using logic."
Yeah.
It's like, and I would have gone, "Whoa, dude, no." I never said that. You're the guy who's been talking about logic for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The reason I don't believe in your God is because you haven't given me evidence.
Yeah.
Okay? Nothing to do with that. But what he did was he put an argument in your mouth.
Yeah.
He refuted your... So it's a straw man.
Yeah.
Okay? And this was amazing. For a guy who went on and on about the laws of logic, it was amazing how he came out with the fallacies like one after the other, right? There was straw man, argument by declaration.
Yeah.
And then he ended with, well, I just can't see how, people can understand. Like, how does the atheist explain how the laws of logic came about? Well, are we seated comfortably, kids? Once upon a time, there was a man named Aristotle. Okay? Mathematics was invented by people so that we could learn how to quantify stuff, right? Ethics and morality were invented, these were concepts developed by people so that we could understand how to coexist in society. Logic is a discipline that was created by very intelligent men to help people learn how they ought to think about things.
Yeah.
Okay? That's really all it was, right? But he just stated it as this, this has to have some sort of universal lawgiver in order for people to understand how to think logically. And he put that argument, and then he put the argument in your mouth, refuted it, and then wrapped up the show by saying, we win, and that's great, and we'll see you next time. Amazing, right? You got Cochraned, totally. But, it's not really your fault, because I think, the whole thing, Jeff Jones, our co-chair this morning, was talking about how he just thought the whole thing was scripted, and I don't know if it was scripted, but clearly they definitely had an idea of a primrose path they wanted to lead you down.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. But anyway, I'm done rattling on, but went on longer than usual because boy, mouth dried out, just getting all that off of my chest. But again, worthwhile, because atheists really ought to be aware, if you think that you're ever going to be in a position of debating Christians, you need to know this kind of legerdemain that they'll just try to engage in. But customarily, there's always some attempt to shift the burden of proof, and just to make it seem like, the people who don't believe there's some invisible magic space pixie in the sky controlling the universe are the ones who have, the problem. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Well, no, frankly. So, but very instructive and certainly worthwhile. And tomorrow night at Godless Gamers, Russell's going to be playing he taped the show yesterday. So anybody who goes to Gamers tomorrow night is going to get a chance to see this. And I'm sure I'll raise a pint to poor Ashley. Because, last word though, the reason I didn't appear for, there's a couple reasons. First, I didn't get the email.
Yeah.
For some reason, the TV feedback emails are going straight into my, Yahoo is filtering them straight into my
spam box.
Yeah. So, which sucks, because I can't figure out how to get it to not do that. Okay. So I have to open the bulk mail folder and wade through all these stupid Viagra and Paris Hilton video ads to find what looks like it's about the show. And then, But, so I didn't get it in the first place, but I probably would not have accepted the invitation, mainly on the grounds that I think there would have been some sort of implied quid pro quo. Yeah. Well, you be a guest on our show, and then we'll be a guest on that. No. The reason we don't have Christians as on-air guests, although we'll take calls from anyone, is because, Christians have...
6 networks.
Yeah. It's 24/7 times 6. Yeah. Okay, to get there, to proselytize on the air, round the clock, 6 24-hour-a-day channels. That's just on Time Warner Cable here in Austin.
Yeah.
We have 90 minutes a week. I see no reason why we should give up our 90 minutes a week so that they can come on and proselytize some more, right? This is our 90 minutes a week.
Yeah.
But we'll talk to anyone. So there's that. But you know something? Even if there hadn't been that implied quid pro quo, one thing that you had mentioned in the email after the show was that they kind of wanted to set it up in such a way to, they kind of said, look, we don't want to have like some big knockdown, drag down debate.
Yeah.
Okay? And my response to that would have been, guys, I promise nothing. All right? I mean, I'm not saying we can't have a civil discussion.
Yeah.
But, you know,
If you makes no sense,
if you make a point that I think is worth challenging, I will challenge it.
Yeah.
So, all right, but very instructive, and congratulations to you for going on, and lots of fun.